founder and president of Divorce Right, and we provide training for HR professionals and company supervisors, and we provide divorce coaching and consulting, providing guidance and direction that your divorcing employees so desperately need. Divorce is a huge disruptor, not only to your employee going through it, but to the company they work for. And our coaches have a unique perspective on divorce that sets us apart from anything else that they may be using. We have a deep understanding of the legal, financial, and emotional aspects of divorce, and we handle even the highest conflict of cases with compassion and professionalism. Our coaches are trained to look at the entire picture, helping your employees make good decisions based on their goals and expectations. So if you're in HR benefits, if you're a manager or you're an HR benefits provider or consultant, please reach out and see if adding our suites of solutions is a good fit for your business. As a reminder, we have SHRM credits for SHRM members, and we'll be posting a link at the end of this broadcast so that you can make sure to grab those. And I want to introduce you to Paulette Rigo. She is my friend. She is my colleague, and she is an incredible certified divorce coach and a mediator, and is one of the best in the business, and is the director of coaching and case management here at Divorce Right. And today we're going to be talking about a difficult topic. In honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we have a former domestic violence prosecutor, and we're going to be talking about the signs and support you need to know for your domestic violence survivors. So let me introduce you to Angela Sarabia. She's graduated from University of Florida Law School with honors. While at UFF, Angela volunteered with a local domestic violence shelter and completed a semester-long internship in a specialized domestic violence unit of the Gainesville State Attorney's Office. Both during and after law school, Angela has volunteered with domestic violence organizations, educating shelter and outreach clients about the court system. She's won awards from multiple domestic violence organizations for her service, and Angela spent part of her legal career as an assistant state attorney in the 6th Judicial Circuit, where she handled both misdemeanor and felony cases. Angela also has a passion for acting and live performance and is currently the president of the board of directors of her local community theater. She's recently taken up playwriting, and in her first play, Duress, Angela combines her passion for dramatic storytelling and her experience working with survivors of violent crime to create a riveting crime drama told from a survivor's perspective. So we're going to talk about that at the end, and we're going to post the link for you so you can look at the play, watch the full production of it. So I'm going to post that link for you a little bit later. And so a little bit about the play. She says, as a prosecutor, I had to battle negative stigma surrounding victims of domestic violence in order to convince police officers, judges, and juries of the forces at work to keep victims in violent situations are much more complex than they first appear. She wanted to lay out some of those forces in a way that audience could relate to. Duress tells the story of a 40-year-old accountant, Anna, who comes into work on a Saturday and interrupts two brothers who are breaking into a safe. Since the brothers are bigger, stronger, and armed, she is in a position of powerlessness in the moment she encounters them. Inspired by her need to get back to her loved ones, Anna must draw on past experiences, take risks, and turn the tables on the brothers to make it out of the situation alive. So you're going to be able to go to that link and see more about that. And it sounds really, really exciting. I'm really excited myself to take a look at that. So Paulette, I'm going to turn it over to you and get us started.
Well, hello, everyone. First of all, Angela, thank you for being here. Having you with us today is so beneficial, particularly with this topic. So in my world, I see this more often than not, where some aspect of domestic violence, where perhaps one partner maybe delays decision-making, procrastinates, or just avoids any conversation, and they show so much stress and fear. So as an expert with all of your background, and I love the show, I can't wait to hear more about Duress, but we'd love it if you'd break down what the signs and symptoms of domestic violence or intimate partner violence looks like. People need to know that. So can you break it down for us?
Yes. So a lot of times it's very hard to see. It's very much crime that there's a lot of silence around it. If someone broke into your house, you wouldn't feel bad telling anybody what happened, but victims often blame themselves. They feel partially responsible for the violence. The batterer is all the time reinforcing that, telling them, yeah, me off. So they feel shame, a lot of shame around it. So they're going to be trying to hide it in most cases. And a lot of signs you're looking for is missed days at work, sick a lot. When they do show up, there may be unexplained injuries, kind of indicating, injuries around the eye or face that don't seem to match how the victim said they got the injuries. Sometimes it won't be as visible as an obvious injury to the face. It may be wearing a lot of long sleeve shirts, covering up a lot of things, and then when asked about it, really giving short answers, not wanting to talk about it. Or some of the things to look for physically. If there's not those physical signs, sometimes a victim will complain about the other parts of the relationship that are hard. And as we're going to talk about in a little bit, a lot of the hallmarks of an abusive relationship is a batterer always putting the victim down, controlling her behavior, not allowing her, I've got to get home because I got to be home by a certain time. The victim may be more willing to talk about those non-physical signs of that an abusive relationship is going on. But anytime a partner is constantly putting someone down, blaming them for everything, restricting who they can and can't talk to, restricting where they can go, those types of hallmarks can sometimes clue you in that there may be more going on.
I hadn't even thought about the clothing, right? With the sleeves or the arms.
Yeah.
I sometimes see the hair in front of the face, kind of,
dark
like a
glasses.
lot of sunglasses or like a baseball cap or hair in their face, I mentioned, but like maybe a lot of excessive cover up or, if there's a
Yeah.
bruise.
And any one thing, you may have somebody just they like to wear, and any one of these may not immediately be a sign. But what I would say is you're in the workplace, asking those probing questions and then encouraging a victim that you really do want to hear the answer, that you're interested. If she says something like, oh, it was just this, asking those follow-up questions. Well, you say that, but then why would this other thing be taking place? And just letting her know that you're willing to hear about it. A lot of times, victim comes to the workplace feeling like, I'm at work. Nobody wants to hear my private life. They just want me to get the job done. They are not interested to hear about my love life. They don't want to hear about this. Sometimes just asking those careful questions and sitting there and listening to the answer and asking the follow-up questions can signal that you're willing to hear about this and that you are interested in her safety and what's going on in her personal life, because it is important to you.
That is so helpful. Well, I don't remember the exact year. I think it was 1635. And I remember the first divorce case was in Boston, of all places, with the Clark family. And I know there's some evolution of divorce, but can you, as an expert with your background of the law and being a domestic violence prosecutor, share what that evolution or the history of divorce looks like? You don't have to go back to the 1600s, but maybe over the last... That was a bit of a quiz. I didn't mean to drop that ball on you. I just remember like the history lesson of when I studied it. But would you explain the evolution, or shall we say the history of what divorce has evolved to over the last 100 years?
Certainly. So certainly what I can kind of speak to is the ways in which as it respects violence, that divorce cases, have been around so as long as we've had divorce, but in as far as violence goes, even up to, let's say, 100 years ago, early 1900s, violence was seen as a private matter between individuals. Any divorce case is a private matter between individuals. It's really not for public concern. And that's really wrongheaded, because violence is criminal, and criminal behavior is basically all of our business, because we all want to live in a free society where crime is not taking place. So I would say all the way up until the 1950s, even when law enforcement would be called in because of a violent incident between two married individuals, they would still kind of see it as a private family matter. And so oftentimes they would advise and separate. They would tell the guy, hey, look, go stay somewhere else tonight. They would give the woman some listen, try not to argue so much, whatever. And they would kind of see it as, hey, this is a family matter. It's really not a matter for the government to be involved in.
Mm,
Well, the fatality rates were off the charts and victims were dying. And so in the 1970s, they did this experiment and where they basically randomly assigned some law enforcement officers were going to advise and separate, and some were going to mandatory arrest. And wouldn't you know it, fatality rates went way down in cases of mandatory arrest. And when that study hit, it slowly became the policy in law enforcement agencies across the nation that mandatory arrest is now in place for almost all cases of domestic violence. So oftentimes, a victim will now call the police will come out, it'll be established that someone has actually committed a crime of violence, and then law enforcement will arrest who they determine to be the primary aggressor. They're supposed to look at the overall physical ability of the parties, and oftentimes the primary aggressor is the more physically capable person, who ordinarily usually is the guy in a heterosexual couple, and then arrest that person and take them away. And a lot of times you'll have a victim saying, well, I didn't want him arrested. I just wanted you to come and intervene. And oftentimes law say, look, we have to arrest because now mandatory arrest is required. And usually the defendant, the batterer, is held in custody without bond all the way until the morning. That gives the victim some time, if she wants to get her belongings, get to a shelter, get to a place of safety. So that
mm.
evolution, now we all seem to understand that once there's violence in a relationship, it's no longer a private matter between individuals. Now the community needs to get involved because we all have a public interest in people feeling safe in their own homes.
And I can see how that's highly beneficial. I'm often asked by clients or pre-clients, how do I know it's okay to call the police? Or when do I know should I call the police? Of course, it's always a tricky question. I always say call anyway, but who am I to say don't call? But it's so hard, right? And now that it's kudos to it not being sweeping under the rug as it was in the 19
Right.
20, 30, 40, 50s when this happened in the 70s. But now we're exacerbating that feeling of shame. Like, oh no, everybody knows about it, right? It's like, do I want to keep it private, or is it better if it's public? And it's such a double-edged sword. I can see the confusion.
Well, I want to speak to that thing that you may call the police and just point out violence is a crime. So any unwanted touch or strike is going to be a crime in almost all jurisdictions. So I don't care if it's somebody flicking you on the ear. If you didn't want that to happen, that's a crime. So it doesn't have to be violence. If it's a push, if it's a shove, and especially victims usually know, hey, it's going to escalate from there, they can call law enforcement with that. It doesn't have to be something visible. There doesn't have to be visible injuries. Just the victim saying, this is what happened to me is usually enough. But I want people to keep in mind, even the threat of violence is criminal. If someone threatens you with physical harm and they have the apparent ability to carry it out, then that is assault in Florida. I'm sure every state in the nation has a different wording of that, but even a threat can be criminal if it's immediate and if the person's, if they take out a knife and say, this is it, and you feel threatened by that knife, that's enough to call law enforcement. You don't have to wait until some particular physical thing happens, and I would encourage people to do that. As far as the workplace is concerned, anytime a victim is talking about disturbing things going on in their relationship, I think it's important that professionals in the workplace encourage everyone to say, speak up. We want you to come here to work, obviously, but you're part of our work family. We want you safe. You're not going to be a good worker if you don't feel safe in your own home. So we want to hear about it. It's okay to talk about it. And you're not to blame for any violence because we all learned when we were 5 to keep our hands to ourselves. And we all know how to do that. And so if you tell us that is going on, you don't have to worry that you're going to lose your job. We're going to come around and we're going to support you.
I'm glad you used that example of somebody flicking your ear, just sort of provoking you, right? Do you see a little bit of a difference because now in situations, so many people whip out their phone and take a video or a photograph of these type of incidents, particularly in the car or in the yard or in the home, where there is no one present and you don't have any witnesses, but the phone can now act as, I don't mean the phone, but the camera on the phone. Phones are cameras, cameras are phones. Aren't they one and the same now? But
yeah,
it's so different back in the 70s. You didn't have that ability to whip out the, TV camera. So it's a whole different world now. I mean, everything we see on television, social media, wherever is, oh, everything's videotaped, and the people get there faster than the news crews. We don't even need news crews anymore because everybody takes videos. But this is the best way to document it, no? When there's with a
Absolutely.
video, or even
So oftentimes when I was prosecuting cases, police officers were, they had digital cameras. They didn't have all the smartphones then. They were just getting smartphones when I left the state attorney's office. But oftentimes we would counsel victims to be their own evidence gatherers. If they, let's say the night of an incident, they were struck, there was a little bit of redness on the face. Some of those bruises are going to develop over time. Take those photographs. You have the technology. If something's going on, hit that record button. Sometimes that's enough to let the batterer know that this is being recorded. That said, that phone's not going to protect you. Pulling out that phone, sometimes that can be inflammatory. And you shove a phone in someone's face, and all of a sudden things go from 0 to 60 real fast. And a lot of times batterers grabs a phone, they're taking the phone. So all I would say to that is recording and documentation should be secondary to safety. If you're in a position where you can feel it when it's getting unsafe, you get yourself out of there, you get yourself to a place of safety, and don't worry about recording or preserving anything until you're in that place of safety. A lot of times, in the workplace, if you have someone who's there and they discuss like a disturbing incident and they show you a video on their phone that something happened and it got a little bit abusive, it may be something that you check out and you say, hey, I'm seeing this on your phone and it looks like you may need to think about your safety here. Your safety is important. You deserve to feel safe.
Yeah. So you did mention that, the victim knows what's coming next, or knows what they're like, or kind of knows, oh, here we go again. But so can you explain or enlighten us? Is there a cycle of violence that we should be aware of?
Absolutely. So a lot of times we're talking about that negative stigma. People don't always understand why a victim would stay in a relationship where violence is going on. And if you talk to most people, they're going to say something like, oh, if anybody put their hands on me, man, I tell you, I would be out that day. But I heard a professor one time, and it was absolutely right. How many of us have stayed in a relationship putting up with way more than we should have? And if let's put up the if can we put up the power and control wheel first? If everybody wants to make their screen big, kind of go full screen with this so you can read it, these are some of the hallmarks that you will see in uh, a violent relationship, and it's power and control. That violence is about the batter attempting to obtain control over the victim. He's going to do that lots of different ways. I say he, it's sometimes batters are female, but by and large, it's going to be men. So he is using intimidations. He's using emotional abuse, putting her down all the time. He's isolating her. You may see that in the workplace where he doesn't want her hanging out with anybody after work. He doesn't want her socializing at the corporate social events because he doesn't want her talking to anybody because he wants her to feel isolated because she'll feel more powerless. He may use finances, spiritual matters, children, all as ways to control her. It may even be male privilege. We're seeing that finally go away, but sometimes it's, hey, this is my right as a husband or as a man to do certain things. And then if can we switch over to the cycle of violence? Maybe I have to switch. There it is. Okay. So this is the cycle that victims will be familiar with. And it kind of is this cyclical thing that happens that feel powerless and stuck. And that is you'll begin with the calm phase. So everything is calm, everything's okay, but then you'll feel this rising tension. She knows something's coming. She doesn't know when, but she feels he's been on edge, he's been upset. Then some violent incident will occur and it'll be really bad. This is where she'll sometimes call law enforcement, or she'll reach out to co-workers, or she may even talk to the HR. She may call out for help. But then after the violence takes place, there's this makeup honeymoon phase where he's really sorry. He didn't mean for it to get that bad. He loves her. He doesn't want to lose her. He's got a lot of issues he promises he's going to work through, and this is never going to happen again. And that usually brings the victim back in, and she starts to feel like, well, gee, maybe things will change, and he's telling her a lot of things that she really wants to hear because she wants him. She just doesn't want the violence. And he's telling her, this is it. This isn't going to happen again. And then the calm phase starts again. And that cyclical nature of it is important to recognize because it keeps victims stuck, but also it tends to escalate. So if you're talking to somebody in your workplace and they share with you, he's slapped me or he's pushed me, she may say it's not that bad, I can live with it. But what I would often say to victims is, well, you're going to see this cycle escalate where next time it's going to be, now it's a closed fist, or now weapons are involved, and it's going to escalate to a place where you cannot manage it anymore. And that's why right now, even if you feel like you can live with it, it's time to get out now, because I've never seen this cycle just stop without intervention. So it's important to recognize it and be aware of it. Not just if you're going through it, you need to know about this, but if you have loved ones or folks in your workplace, just being aware of this cycle and talking through it. Maybe asking your coworker, hey, have you noticed this tends to happen every few months or so? Have you noticed that he's really sorry afterwards, but it tends to happen again? Sometimes just picking their brain about that cycle and being aware of it is a great way to support people in your workplace.
Right. And not to blame the victim, right? She should not
Yes.
herself for that violence.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Vicky, because I think we all know she's not to blame, but sometimes when we go into our, problem solving mode that we all tend to do, we might have a victim tell us, "Oh, he flipped over a table last night." And our natural instinct may be like, "Well, what did you say? What led to that?" Like, in your mind, you're just trying to make sense of it. But what you're communicating to the victim is, what did you do that caused him to engage in this behavior? And you may be unwittingly putting that blame on her, not meaning to. So just constantly reinforcing, like, if a coworker tells you something, he punched a hole in the wall, your response could be, hey, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That he shouldn't have punched a hole in the wall. You don't deserve to feel unsafe. You know, I think you should think strongly about exiting that circumstance. That's awful that that happened, but just being mindful that we don't want to say anything that would encourage this idea that what did you say to him that made him punch a hole in the wall? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
What do you do to provoke it? Yeah.
yeah. So if it gets to the point where he's arrested, or she, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually working with somebody now that there is a man that was the victim of domestic violence.
Yeah,
So I do want to be very clear that
it does happen.
it does happen. It does happen. But so what happens in the court proceedings? What does that look like for these victims? And how can somebody at the HR level support them in that?
I love that question. So first, the arrest will occur. Mandatorily, whoever's arrested will be held in custody till the next morning, no bond. But then when usually they're going to get out. So some bond is going to be, and bond, bail, whatever you want to call it, the court is going to place conditions on the arrested individual where they can get out of jail if they pay a certain amount of money to get out. And then they abide by the conditions. And usually no contact with the victim is going to be a condition of pretrial release unless the victim comes into court and says she wants the no contact lifted. So, no contact. So, you may have somebody in your workplace that says, oh, he was arrested last night, but he's calling me. Well, a lot of times you can tell that I'm saying her just, shorthand, but you tell her he probably shouldn't be calling you. It's probably been the case that the court has ordered him to have no contact with you. Once the person bonds out and no contact is ordered, victims need to let the workplace know. So if he's coming up to the workplace, that's probably a violation of his pretrial release conditions, and he can be rearrested and placed back into custody for violating that. Once a couple weeks go by, a prosecutor like me will get the arrest report in their office on their desk. The person's been arrested, but a lawyer has to actually look at the circumstances and say, yes, I agree with the police that a crime has occurred, and actually formally charge the defendant with a crime, whatever it's going to be. It may be different than what he was arrested for, because police officers aren't lawyers. So they're going to write arrest report what they think the charges should be. But a lot of times I, as a prosecutor, would look at the arrest report and say, oh, we got a lot more charges here. If he threw something at her, that's assault. If he broke her phone, that's witness tampering. He's trying to keep her from calling law enforcement. So I'd add some charges. So then the arrested person becomes a defendant. They get sent formal documentation of what they're charged with, and the court process begins. That first court appearance is called an arraignment. He or she is formally told what they're charged with. Every time the defendant goes to court, the victim gets noticed and is allowed to attend if she desires. She's not required to, but she's allowed to. So I would say any victim should be in touch with the prosecutor to say, hey, do I need to come? Because, she doesn't want to miss work if she doesn't have to. She may not want to come until she's required to, but eventually there'll be pretrial. Most cases will be worked out with a pretrial agreement. And in rare cases, it'll go to trial. And then the victim may or may not be called to testify, depending on what the prosecutor wants to do.
So is it a good idea for either someone from the workplace to go with her or friends?
Yeah,
what does that
that's a
look like?
great question. I think a lot of times victims are afraid to go in alone. They know they're going to face their batterer and see him in court, and they're afraid. So if
Yes.
you're in a workplace, sometimes just offering to come with the victim. Maybe you're not going to say anything. You're just going to stand by her side. Victims oftentimes will really appreciate that. I had somebody in my church who just said, "Will you just come with me so I don't have to walk in there all alone?" And it was hugely fortifying to her. I wasn't her attorney. I wasn't representing her. I didn't have to say anything. I just had to be there physically so she felt some support. And sometimes that's all you can do, but it's tremendously helpful.
Yeah. So if you believe a coworker is experiencing violence or maybe their children is witnessing the violence, what should an employer do?
So, I would say this, if children are witnessing the violence, let's say you have a victim and she's talking and she says, this happened right in front of the kids. Sometimes it's time to call the anonymous child abuse hotline. There's one in every state, but the children witnessing the violence is an abusive thing for them to have experienced. So I would often call the abuse hotline myself as a prosecutor if I saw in the arrest report that children were present for the violence. So sometimes you're doing that even if she doesn't want you to, because it'll initiate this child protective team coming in, and they may require the victim to get out of the situation and keep the kids safe from witnessing the violence. But yeah, I would just ask about that.
Yeah, I think we have to also stop the cycle of continuing with the children, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is how it goes, multi-generational abuse, right?
They're seeing it and they may imprint on that. They may be more likely to become abusers or victims as adults, but it's also tremendously damaging to them physically, psychosocially, psychologically, just to witness that between their mother and their father, or their parents or step parents. So we've got to get them out of that situation, even if that's not what the victim wants to happen. Because right now she's in crisis.
Yeah.
She may just be wanting to maintain that status because she thinks she can manage it, but the children need to be raised in a loving, safe environment. It may be time for the workplace to step in and say, look, we've got to make this call because we've been informed of this, and your children's safety is paramount. As long as a victim is willing to leave the abusive person and get to a place of safety, she's not going to lose her kids. But she may have to exit the abusive circumstance, because I've seen situations where our local, we call it DCF in Florida, but the child abuse people will threaten to take the children and remove them from the home if the victim refuses to leave the batterer.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we could go on and on and on about this topic, and maybe we will. And this is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, and you've shined a light. You've shown a light on some of the things that employees go through. And so I do want to kind of shift it just a little bit, talk about your play, because I think it's an absolutely amazing opportunity for us to see how you've taken your passion for criminal law and what you've done. So tell us a little bit more about the play than besides what I talked about earlier.
Sure. So I got struck with this idea that often victims feel powerless, but how can we flip the script when they do get out? What motivates them? Why do they get out? How do they get out? So the play is not about intimate partner violence. They're strangers in the play because I didn't want to get into a lot of the depressing parts of intimate partner violence, but just I wanted to talk about how violence is used as a tool of power and control against victims. So I created this empowering story where this woman walks into a situation, encounters these violent individuals, and how she turns the tables on them, and how the whole time what's motivating her is getting back to the people she loves because they need her. And it was just such an empowering thing to write and talk about. And then if you put that link in the chat and anybody wants to click on the link, they can see this trailer we shot of just so you can get a feel of it. You can watch a full production, you can read about kind of what motivated me, but it was a great way to channel and tell it all from the victim's perspective.
And when you and I first talked about this topic a few weeks ago, we were talking about I used domestic violence victims, and you said no, let's change that word to survivors. And
Absolutely.
that's the kind of thing that we need as those of us that may know someone that's going through that. They are survivors, and let's not make them victims. Angela, thank you so much for being with us today. I want to remind everybody that we do have SHRM credits for you. Just click on that link right there in the chat and fill out the form, and you will get those SHRM credits. We hope that this was informative for you, that it will be helpful for you. If, God forbid, one of your employees goes through a traumatic experience like domestic abuse. So thank you again, Angela. Thank you, Paulette, for joining. And we will
congratulations on the play. It's amazing.
Isn't it awesome? I'm very excited. I'm very excited for all of us. Thank you all again. And we will see you all next week on another Divorce Right LinkedIn Live as we share more information about how you can support your divorcing employees. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your week.